You know what haunts me the most? Not the affair itself, though God knows it feels like a knife in my gut. It's the silence, the quiet moments I ignored, the whispers in my chest I convinced myself weren't there. Ashley and I have been married for 10 years, together for 15. I thought I knew her better than anyone. Her smile, her moods, the way she crinkled her nose when she was upset. We met in college. She was ambitious, studying marketing, while I chased coaching dreams on the football field. She used to tease me about how predictable I was. Predictable is just another word for reliable, I'd argue. And she'd laugh and say, "You're right. That's what I love about you." It wasn't just words back then. It felt real. I believed her, every syllable. But standing outside her office that night, I realized predictable might have just meant blind. I don't know why I ignored the signs. Maybe I didn't want to admit they were there. Maybe I was afraid that if I acknowledged the cracks, they'd grow into something I couldn't fix. It started with a text. "Working late tonight. Big presentation tomorrow." I read it twice, my gut tightening in a way I couldn't explain. Tommy, my assistant coach, looked up from his clipboard. Another late night for Ashley? His tone was casual, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of hesitation, like he didn't want to overstep. I forced a laugh that sounded fake even to me. "Yeah, big project at work." Tommy nodded slowly, like he was choosing his next words carefully. "She's been working a lot lately, huh?" "She's ambitious," I said quickly, trying to shut the conversation down. "That's one of the things I love about her." He hesitated for a moment before shrugging. "Let me know if you need anything, coach." As I watched him walk away, the unease in my chest grew heavier. It wasn't what he said. It was what he didn't say. By 7, I couldn't sit still anymore. I grabbed her favorite Thai food, pad cew, extra spicy, and decided to surprise her. I told myself it was because I missed her, because I wanted to see her smile after a long day. But deep down, I think I already knew. I needed to know. The office parking lot was dimly lit, the hum of a flickering streetlight the only sound. Her silver Lexus was parked neatly under it. My stomach churned as I entered the building, the takeout bag suddenly feeling like it weighed 100 pounds. The security guard at the desk barely glanced up. "Fourth floor?" I asked, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. He nodded without looking away from his phone. When the elevator doors opened on the 4th floor, I heard it. A laugh. Not just any laugh. Hers. But it wasn't the laugh I knew. The one that filled our home with warmth and joy. This was different. Softer. Intimate. My feet moved before my brain caught up, each step feeling like I was walking towards something I could never unsee. The conference room door was slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. And then I saw them. Ashley was perched on the edge of the table, her skirt slightly raised, legs crossed at the ankles. Nate, her mentor, stood close, too close, his hand resting on her thigh. "Stop," she giggled, her voice playful. "Someone could walk in." "Nobody's here," Nate replied, his hand tightening. "Besides, you like the thrill." The takeout bag slipped from my hands, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The sound seemed to echo in the quiet hallway. Ashley's head snapped toward me, her eyes wide with shock. "Travis!" she gasped, sliding off the table. Her voice cracked, like she was already bracing for what was coming. I didn't move, didn't speak, just stared at her, trying to process what I was seeing. She took a step toward me, her hands trembling. "Travis, wait. This isn't—" "Don't," I said, my voice low and cold. Nate stepped forward, raising his hands in what he probably thought was a gesture of peace. "Listen, man, don't you dare," I interrupted, my voice sharp enough to cut through the tension. "Don't even try." Ashley reached out to me, her face pale and streaked with tears. "Please, Travis, let me explain." "Explain what?" My voice cracked, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. "Explain how you lied to me? How you looked me in the eye every day and pretended everything was fine." "It wasn't," she started, but I cut her off. Don't lie to me again." My voice rose, anger and heartbreak crashing together like a storm. "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly, the sound raw and hollow. "A mistake is burning dinner or forgetting a birthday. This? This is betrayal. Tears streamed down her face, her lip trembling as she tried to speak. Travis, I love you. No. I shook my head, my voice firm. You don't do this to someone you love. For a moment, the three of us stood there in silence, the weight of everything unsaid crushing down on us. Nate cleared his throat, as if to break the tension. Maybe we should all just shut up, I snapped, my fists clenching at my sides. You don't get to talk. You don't get to stand there and act like this is normal. Ashley stepped between us, her hands up as if she could physically stop the collapse of everything we'd built. Travis, please, don't do this here. Let's go home and talk. Talk? I scoffed, my voice dripping with disbelief. About what? How long this has been going on? How many nights you've spent with him instead of me? Her silence was all the answer I needed. My chest tightened, the air around me feeling too thin. I gave you everything, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. And this is what you do to us? Her tears fell faster, but I couldn't bring myself to care. I never meant, don't, I said, cutting her off one last time. Just don't. I turned and walked away, each step feeling like it took a piece of me with it. By the time I reached the elevator, I wasn't sure there was anything of me left. I don't remember much about that first night at Jackson's bar. Just flashes. The cold weight of the glass in my hand. The whiskey burning its way down, though it didn't touch the pain clawing at my chest. And Jackson, steady and silent behind the bar, watching me like he was waiting for me to shatter. How bad? He asked eventually, his voice low but steady. I let out a laugh, bitter, hollow. Does it matter? It matters, he said, pouring another drink and sliding it toward me. I stared at the amber liquid, swirling it around the glass. I walked in on her. With him. The words felt sharp in my throat, like broken glass. Jackson didn't say anything at first. He just leaned on the counter, his jaw tightening. Jesus, Travis. Yeah, I said bitterly. Jesus. Who is he? Her boss, I muttered, the word tasting like poison. Nate. She called him her mentor. Guess she forgot to mention the rest. Jackson's eyes narrowed. How long? I don't know, I admitted, shaking my head, but it didn't feel new. The way they laughed together, touched each other. It was like they'd been doing it for months, maybe longer. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of the bar. You didn't. No, I interrupted sharply, knowing what he was about to ask. I didn't lose it. I didn't hit him. I just stood there like an idiot while they scrambled to cover themselves. Jackson let out a slow breath, shaking his head. You're not going back there tonight. I don't know where else to go, I admitted, my voice breaking. You're coming to our place, he said simply. I shook my head. I don't need. Shut up, Travis, Jackson said, his voice uncharacteristically sharp. You're not staying here all night drowning in this. Karen will come get you. You don't have to do this alone. Karen showed up 20 minutes later, her hair pulled back in a messy bun and one of Jackson's jackets draped over her shoulders. She took one look at me and sighed, her eyes soft with something I didn't want to name. Come on, she said gently. Let's get you home. Not home, I muttered, standing up. Not there. I know, she said. The drive to their house was quiet. Karen kept glancing over at me, her hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Finally, she spoke. Do you want to talk about it? No, I said flatly. Okay, she replied softly, her eyes flicking to the road. You don't have to. When we got to their house, she handed me a blanket and gestured toward the couch. You're staying here tonight. If you need anything, just let me know. I nodded, my throat too tight to say anything. It was almost 2 a.m. when I heard Karen's footsteps in the hallway. I was still awake, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun in slow, hypnotic circles. My phone buzzed on the coffee table, her name lighting up the dark room. Ashley. I didn't pick it up. Karen appeared in the doorway, holding 2 mugs. Still awake? She asked softly. Yeah, I muttered, sitting up as she walked over. She set one of the mugs in front of me and took a seat in the armchair across from the couch. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of the night pressing down on both of us. She's been texting you, hasn't she? Karen asked finally. I nodded, staring at the mug in my hands. Yeah, saying she wants to explain. Like that'll change anything? Are you going to let her? No, I said quickly. What's the point? Nothing she says will undo what she did. Karen leaned forward, her hands wrapped around her mug. You're right. It won't. But maybe it's not about her. Maybe it's about you. I frowned. What the hell does that mean? It means, she said carefully, that sometimes hearing someone out isn't about fixing things. It's about closure. For you. I shook my head, the lump in my throat growing tighter. I don't want closure. I just want this to stop hurting. Karen's eyes softened, and she reached out to rest a hand on my knee. I know, and it will, but not all at once. You've got to let yourself feel it first. I don't even know how to do that, I admitted, my voice breaking. You don't have to figure it all out tonight, she said gently. Just let yourself be angry, or sad, or whatever you're feeling. It's okay not to be okay, Travis. I didn't respond. I couldn't. Instead, I stared down at the mug, the steam curling in lazy tendrils. At dawn, I found myself in their guest bathroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My eyes were bloodshot, my face pale and drawn. I barely recognized myself. I splashed cold water on my face, but it didn't help. The man in the mirror still looked broken. My phone buzzed again, her name lighting up the screen. Please, Travis. Let me explain. I didn't delete the message. Not yet, but I didn't reply either. When I walked into the kitchen, Karen was already there, pouring coffee. She looked up when she saw me, her face soft with concern. You okay? She asked. No, I said honestly, but I think I'll get there. Someday. Her lips curved into a small, sad smile. That's all you need to focus on for now. I nodded, taking the cup of coffee she handed me. For the first time since that night, the weight on my chest felt just a little bit lighter. Coach, are we running another set? Or are you just going to keep staring at the field? Tommy's voice cut through my foggy thoughts. I blinked and realized I'd been standing still, the clipboard hanging limp in my hand. The kids on the field were watching me, their faces uncertain. Run it again, I said, trying to sound firm, authoritative. Tommy didn't move right away. He stood there, helmet under his arm, eyebrows furrowed. You okay, coach? I'm fine, I snapped, sharper than I meant to. Just do the drills. He hesitated for a moment, then nodded and jogged off, but not before glancing back at me with that look. Concern, maybe even pity. I hated that look. When practice was over, I stayed behind in the locker room. The kids had left, their laughter fading down the hallway, leaving me alone with the hum of the fluorescent lights and the faint smell of sweat. I sat on the bench, staring at my wedding ring. The gold caught the light, a mocking glint that made my chest ache. The silence was interrupted by the buzz of my phone on the bench next to me. I didn't have to look to know who it was. Ashley. Her name lit up the screen, followed by the message, Please, Travis. Just talk to me. I stared at it for a long moment, my thumb hovering over the screen, before the phone buzzed again. I ended it with Nate. I'm so sorry. Please let me explain. I clenched my jaw and tossed the phone aside, letting it vibrate uselessly on the metal bench. Travis? I looked up, startled. Karen stood in the doorway, 2 paper coffee cups in her hands. What are you doing here? I asked, though there was no bite to my voice. She shrugged, walking in and setting one of the cups down next to me. Jackson said you've been sleeping on our couch again. Thought you might need something warm. I shook my head, looking away. I'm fine. Sure you are, she said, sitting down across from me. Her tone was gentle, but her eyes were sharp, cutting through my denial. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that feels heavy but not uncomfortable. She sipped her coffee while I stared at the floor. She called me, Karen said eventually. That caught my attention. My eyes snapped to hers. What did she want? She said she ended it with him, that she wants to talk to you. I let out a bitter laugh, leaning back against the lockers. Talk? About what? How sorry she is. How it was all a mistake. She sounded desperate, Travis, Karen said softly. Good, I snapped. She should be. Karen flinched, and a wave of guilt washed over me. Sorry, I muttered. It's okay, she said, her voice steady. You're angry. You're allowed to be. I'm not just angry, I admitted, my voice breaking. I'm lost, Karen. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to stop feeling like this. Karen reached out, resting her hand on mine. You don't have to figure it all out right now, but you have to let yourself feel it. All of it. The anger, the hurt, the grief. Otherwise, it's going to consume you. I stared at her, my throat tight. What if I don't want to feel it? She squeezed my hand gently. Then you'll never heal. Her words hung in the air, a quiet truth I didn't want to hear. That night, I went back to the house. The air felt heavy as I stepped inside, like the walls were holding their breath. I wandered into the kitchen, where her mug still sat on the counter, world's best wife. I picked it up, turning it over in my hands. The words felt like a cruel joke. Stupid mug, I muttered under my breath, setting it down harder than I meant to. I went upstairs and stopped in the bathroom. Her toothbrush was still there, bright purple, sitting next to mine. It felt like it didn't belong anymore. Like she didn't belong anymore. I grabbed it and threw it in the trash, the sound of it hitting the bottom louder than I expected. In the bedroom, I lay down on the bed, still fully dressed. The sheets smelled faintly of her perfume, a scent I used to love but now couldn't stand. My phone buzzed again on the nightstand. Ashley's name appeared on the screen, along with another message. I love you, Travis. Please, just let me explain. I stared at it, my chest tightening. For a moment, I wanted to reply. I wanted to hear her voice, to demand answers, to make her feel the weight of what she'd done. But then I remembered the way she laughed with him, the way she looked at him like he was her whole world. I turned the phone face down and closed my eyes. The silence was suffocating, but I let it consume me. The next morning, I woke up with the same ache in my chest, like a weight I couldn't shake. The house was quiet, too quiet, but I forced myself out of bed. The kitchen still smelled faintly of stale coffee, and the mug I'd slammed down the night before was exactly where I'd left it. I stared at it for a moment before grabbing it and shoving it into the back of the cupboard. Out of sight, out of mind, at least, that's what I told myself. At practice, I tried to focus. The kids were running drills, their shouts and laughter echoing across the field, but my mind was somewhere else. Every time I tried to concentrate, the memories crept in. The way she used to sit in the stands, her smile brighter than the stadium lights. The way she'd wave at me after every game, like I was the only thing that mattered. Coach, you're spacing again, Tommy said, jogging over. I blinked, realizing I'd been staring at the same spot on the field for who knows how long. Run it again, I said automatically. Tommy frowned. Coach, you're not even watching us. What's the point? His words hit harder than I expected. I opened my mouth to snap at him, to tell him to just do what I said, but the look on his face stopped me. He wasn't being disrespectful. He was worried. You're right, I said finally, my voice quieter than I intended. Take 5. Tommy hesitated, then nodded, signaling to the rest of the team. Take a break, guys. I watched him walk away, feeling a strange mix of shame and gratitude. After practice, I sat in my office, the room dimly lit by the fading sunlight. My phone buzzed on the desk. I didn't need to look to know it was her. It had been buzzing all day, her messages piling up like a weight pressing on my chest. Travis? Karen's voice startled me. She was standing in the doorway, her expression soft but serious. You've got to stop sneaking up on me, I said, managing a weak smile. She didn't return it. You've got to stop avoiding everyone who cares about you. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. I'm not avoiding anyone. Jackson called, she said, walking into the room. He said you left last night without saying a word. That's not like you, Travis. I just needed to be alone, I muttered, staring at the stack of papers on my desk. Karen sat down across from me, her eyes never leaving my face. Alone isn't always what you need. I didn't respond. She sighed. You're not the only one who's hurting, you know. Jackson and I are worried about you. The kids on the team are worried about you. I looked at her, my chest tightening. What do you want me to say, Karen? That I'm fine? Because I'm not. I don't know if I ever will be. Her expression softened, and she leaned forward, resting her arms on the desk. I don't want you to say you're fine. I want you to let someone in. You don't have to do this alone, Travis. I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it difficult to speak. I don't even know where to start. With the truth, she said simply. That night, I sat in the garage at Jackson's house, a beer in my hand. The overhead light cast long shadows across the concrete floor, making the room feel emptier than it was. She's still calling, isn't she? Jackson asked, sitting down next to me. I nodded, taking a long sip of the beer. She says she ended it with him, that she wants to talk. And I don't know what to do, I admitted. Part of me wants to hear her out, to believe that we can fix this. But the other part, my voice trailed off. Jackson nodded, understanding without me having to finish. The other part hates her for what she did. Yeah, I said quietly. We sat in silence for a while. The only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator in the corner. Finally, Jackson spoke. You don't have to make a decision right now, you know? Take your time. Figure out what you want, not what she wants. I nodded, though the weight of the decision still pressed down on me. The next morning, I found myself standing in the bathroom, staring at her toothbrush again. It was gone, thrown out the night before. But the empty space where it used to be felt almost louder than its presence. I leaned against the sink, my hands gripping the edge. The man staring back at me in the mirror looked tired, worn down, but there was something else in his eyes, something I hadn't seen in weeks. Determination. I picked up my phone, scrolling through her unread messages. The most recent one stood out. Please, just one conversation. That's all I'm asking. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the screen. Then, with a deep breath, I typed, I'll meet you. One time. That's it. I hit send before I could change my mind, the message delivering with a quiet whoosh. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was taking control. Not of her, not of the situation, but of myself. The cafe wasn't crowded, but it still felt too loud. The clinking of cups, the soft hum of conversation, it all grated against my nerves. I chose a table in the corner, facing the door, and sat with my arms crossed. The coffee in front of me had gone cold, untouched. She walked in 10 minutes late, her eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. For a moment, she hesitated, standing there in the doorway like she wasn't sure she belonged. Part of me wanted to tell her to turn around and leave. The other part wanted answers. Hi, she said softly, sliding into the chair across from me. I didn't respond. I just stared at her, taking in the familiar lines of her face, the way her hands fidgeted with the strap of her purse. You look good, she offered, her voice tentative. Cut the small talk, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. You wanted to talk. So talk. She flinched, but she didn't look away. I don't even know where to start, she admitted. Try the truth, I said, leaning forward. For once. Her eyes glistened, but she blinked back the tears. I ended it with Nate. It's over. It's been over since that night. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. That night? You mean the night I walked in on you? The night I found out my wife was cheating on me? Travis, please, she whispered, her voice breaking. I know I hurt you. I know I betrayed you. But it wasn't. It wasn't what you think. Then what was it, Ashley? I snapped, my voice rising, because from where I stood, it looked pretty damn clear. She looked down at her hands, twisting them together like she was trying to hold herself together. It started with the late nights, she said finally. The stress, the pressure at work. I felt invisible, like I was failing at everything. And then Nate, she swallowed hard. He noticed me. He listened. He made me feel. Don't, I interrupted, my voice cold. Don't you dare say he made you feel alive or special, or whatever bullshit excuse you've been telling yourself. Her tears spilled over, sliding silently down her cheeks. I'm not trying to excuse it, she said. I'm trying to explain. Explain what? I demanded. That you were lonely? That I wasn't enough for you? That you threw away 10 years of marriage for some guy who said the right things at the right time? It wasn't like that, she said, her voice trembling. Then tell me what it was like, Ashley, I said, my anger boiling over. Because I've been replaying it in my head every single day, trying to make sense of it, and I can't. So go ahead. Tell me how it makes sense. Her breath hitched, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. When she finally did, her voice was barely a whisper. It doesn't make sense. It was selfish, and it was stupid, and I wish I could take it back. But I can't. The honesty in her words caught me off guard. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. She reached across the table, her hand hovering near mine. Travis, I love you. I've always loved you. I made a horrible mistake, but I don't want to lose us. Please, please let me fix this. I pulled my hand away, the movement sharp and final. You can't fix this, Ashley. You can't undo what you did. You can't take back the nights you spent with him, the lies you told me, the way you looked at him like he was your world. Her face crumpled, and she looked down at the table, her tears falling freely now. I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. I gave you everything I had, I said, my voice breaking, and it wasn't enough for you. So no, Ashley, you don't get to fix this. You don't get to fix me. She didn't stop me as I walked away. Back in the car, I sat with my hands gripping the steering wheel, my chest heaving. I felt hollow, like something inside me had finally broken free, leaving an emptiness I didn't know how to fill. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I didn't check it. I already knew it was her. Instead, I started the car and drove. Not home, not anywhere in particular, just away. The cafe wasn't crowded, but it felt overwhelming. The clinking of dishes, the murmur of voices, it all pressed against me as I waited. My coffee sat untouched, going cold as I stared out the window, watching the drizzle paint streaks on the glass. She walked in 10 minutes late, her eyes darting around until they landed on me. For a second, she froze in the doorway, like she wasn't sure she should come closer. I didn't move, didn't wave her over, just sat there, waiting to see what she'd do. Finally, she walked over, her heels clicking softly against the floor. Hi, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't reply. I just gestured at the chair across from me. She sat down, her hands immediately fidgeting with the strap of her purse. You look good, she said softly, offering a tentative smile. Don't, I said, my voice sharp but quiet. I'm not here for small talk. Her face fell, and she nodded, folding her hands in her lap. Right. I'm sorry. I leaned back, crossing my arms. So, what do you want to say? She hesitated, her eyes dropping to the table. I want you to know how sorry I am. For everything. I let out a bitter laugh. Sorry? That's it? That's all you've got? No, she said quickly, shaking her head. It's not just that. I know I messed up, Travis. I know I hurt you in ways I can't take back. You're right, I said flatly. You can't. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't look away. I was selfish. I was stupid. I let myself believe things that weren't true, and I let you down. You didn't deserve any of it. I stared at her, my chest tight. Why? She blinked, confused. What? Why did you do it, Ashley? I asked, leaning forward. What was so wrong with us that you thought you needed him? She opened her mouth, then closed it, her hands trembling. It wasn't about you, she said finally. Don't give me that, I snapped. Don't sit there and tell me it wasn't about me when you destroyed everything we built together. Her tears spilled over, but she kept talking. I felt invisible, Travis. Like I was just going through the motions of a life that wasn't mine. And then Nate, he paid attention to me. He made me feel seen. Seen, I repeated, the word bitter in my mouth. You think I didn't see you? You think I didn't love you enough? No, she said quickly, her voice breaking. You loved me too much. You gave me everything, and I took it for granted. The honesty in her words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I ended it with him, she said after a long pause. It was stupid and meaningless, and it's over. It's been over. But I know that doesn't fix what I did. You're right, I said quietly. It doesn't. Her lip trembled, and she looked down at her hands. I love you, Travis. I've always loved you. And I know I don't have the right to ask, but can we try again? The silence between us was deafening. Finally, I shook my head, my voice steady but firm. No. Her head snapped up, her tear-filled eyes searching mine. Travis, please. No, I said again, cutting her off. I can't. I can't look at you without seeing him. I can't hear your voice without remembering the lies. I can't. I can't keep hurting like this. Her face crumpled, and she reached out across the table, but I pulled my hand back. You made your choice, Ashley, and now I'm making mine. She nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, she whispered. So am I said, standing up. As I walked out of the cafe, the cold rain hit my face, but I barely felt it. My chest ached, but there was a strange kind of relief in the pain. Like a weight I'd been carrying for too long was finally gone. Back at Jackson's house, I sat in the garage with a beer in my hand. He came in quietly, pulling up a chair next to me. How'd it go? He asked after a while. I took a sip of my beer, the bitterness grounding me. It's over. Really over this time. Jackson nodded, leaning back. How do you feel? Like shit, I admitted, but also lighter. That's something, he said with a small smile. In the weeks that followed, I started to put the pieces of my life back together. It wasn't easy. Some mornings, I still woke up with a knot in my stomach, the memories threatening to drag me back down. But each day, the weight got a little easier to carry. One afternoon, Karen stopped by my office. You've been smiling more lately, she said, leaning against the doorframe. Have I? I asked, surprised. She nodded. It looks good on you. I smiled, and for the first time in a long time, it felt real. Thanks. The day I left for Portland, Jackson and Karen threw me a small goodbye dinner. We sat on their porch, the summer air warm and filled with the sounds of crickets. To fresh starts, Jackson said, raising his beer. To letting go, I added, clinking my bottle against his. That night, as I packed the last of my things, I found the wedding album. I flipped through it one last time, the photos no longer feeling like daggers in my chest. They were just memories, good ones, even if they didn't last. I closed the album and left it behind. Portland greeted me with gray skies and drizzle, but it felt like a clean slate. My new apartment was small but cozy, the kind of place where I could build something new. One evening, I stopped at a cafe near my building. The waitress brought over my coffee, her smile warm and unassuming. Rain's not letting up anytime soon, she said, glancing outside. Does it ever? I replied, a small smile tugging at my lips. She laughed softly, and for the first time in months, I felt the heaviness inside me lift. As I walked home, the rain splashing against my jacket, I realized something. I wasn't okay. Not completely, but I was getting there. And that was enough.